Hello, my name is Dr. Cecilia Gil Mariño from Argentina, and I will present this work with Dr. Sonia Sasiain from Buenos Aires University, Argentina too. The title of our work is Cinematic Experience and Memory, an Approach of the Oral History of Audiences in Buenos Aires during the Classical Period, the case of Saavedra neighborhood. This work is part of a larger project, Cinema Audiences in Buenos Aires 1933-1955, led by Dr. Clara Krieger. And one of the lines of research corresponds to conducting and analyzing audiovisual interviews in order to think about audiences. What we are going to present now is a work in progress, and therefore we would love to raise questions, concerns, and partial conclusions that are emerging from the analysis of the interviews, and of course they are part of the discussions with the whole group of the project. Some of the axes of analysis of the oral history research line of this larger project are related with the idea of the cinematic experience as a way of inhabiting the city, and how the expansion of the city was parallel to that one of the movie theaters. Also, we are very interested in the configuration of affective cartographies of entertainment through the memories of the cinematic experience of the audiences. Another thing that we are very interested in is are the relationships between the commercial logics of exhibition and the configuration of these sociocultural practices, such as the experience of the premiere and repetition, the perception of time, the material experience of the movie theater, and the habits of going out in general, among others. That's why we are trying out a microanalysis strategy to think about the links between cinematographic experience, territory, memory, and affections. That's why we are trying to do a comparative analysis between different neighborhoods of the city. Also, we would love to point out some concerns about the case of Buenos Aires. Something that we are seeing is that the testimonies of the interviews account for several of the characteristics revealed in other case studies in other countries, such as Mexico, UK, Italy, etc. These characteristics shows how the memory of the experience of sociability is a vector of the memory of this experience, how the cinematographic memory is part of a collective cultural memory, how the movie theater and the experience of going to the movies was an interclass encounter, etc. That's why we ask ourselves within this idea of cinema as a very a universal mass media experience for the idea of vernacular modernism by Miriam Hansen, what does what are the local features of these experiences? That's why we would love to point out some features of the mass cultural consumption market in this period. First, we have to say that the conformation of Buenos Aires society in terms of migration and social mobility stood out if we compare with other cities in the region. Also, we have to point out about the ways in which intermediality occurs for these spectators. Also, the inherent tension of this middle class between the idea of the local, the American, and the European as a symbol of distinction. Also, we are seeing that these imaginaries that are often based on antithetical binomials such as downtown neighborhoods, traditional modern, which in turn have geographical and cultural correlates and extremely important elements in the construction of these memories, but also at the same time, they are in tension with the description of the memory of their practices that propose less defined territories. And also we have to highlight the process of urbanization and expansion of Buenos Aires city into the neighborhood. That's why we are testing this reduction of the scale to analyze the territory and its heterogeneity of experience. Also, to present this case, we have to say that the cinephilia in Buenos Aires compared to the rest of the country and other countries in the region also stood out. Because the city had an average of 200 movie theaters throughout the period 1930-1950, with a population about 2.5 million inhabitants. Most of these theaters, of this movie theater, they were located in the downtown of the city, the District 14. I will show you a map then. Also, this urbanization process in some neighborhood is long-lasting and slow. It's long-lasting and slow, as the case of Saavedra, this neighborhood that we are going to talk, where until today there are many green areas, and that's why all the interviews had the self-perception of living of the neighborhood as a countryside. In this period, also, this movie theater became palace. They increased the capacity of the halls. This expansion of the city and entertainment was parallel to that of the transportation. And the city was a center of attraction for the suburbs. And also, something very curious that happened in Buenos Aires in the 30s is that the social life of the neighborhood is linked to a particular political phenomenon. While the national government during the 30s was conservative and very Catholic, the city's Consejo Deliberante, the legislative power, was socialist and from the Radical Party, the UCR party. And they encouraged the clubs, the civil association activities. So there was a very important secularity of the public space in these years. That's why we are trying to ask ourselves, what are the futures of modernization process and modern neighborhood imaginaries in Buenos Aires in these years, 30s, 40s, and 50s, based on the experience of going to the movies. And what was the role of the neighborhood movie theaters in the configuration of a porteño Buenos Aires cinephilia? Here we can find two pictures of very important movie theater palace in Buenos Aires downtown, the Opera, and just in front the Gran Rex. These pictures are from 1940, and we can see how the Opera stood out in in relationship with the architecture of the other buildings nearby. Also, something that we are facing in this process, in this first part of our project, is some, we can say, methodological problems, like regarding the representativeness and scale. Until now, we have a total of 28 semi-structured in-depth interviews with people born between 1924 and 1945 who lived during their childhood in different neighborhoods of the city of Buenos Aires. The interviews are about 1 hour or 1 hour and 30 minutes. 4 of them correspond to the neighborhood of Saavedra. Saavedra is a neighborhood that is on the northern edge of the city and was part of the district 16th. And some of the questions or problems that we are also thinking is it possible to define a representative number of interviews to inquire into questions of memory about the experience of going to the movies in the city of Buenos Aires over a period of more than 20 years? If so, what would it be, that number? And how to think about subjective and collective issues of memories? Is it through an increase in the corpus of interviews or through dialogue with contemporary and subsequent critical discourses? Is it through thinking singularities or finding homogeneous parameters? These are questions that we are searching right now, and we are thinking of, with the tools of microhistory, oral history, public memory studies, and affect studies. Here we find a table of the movie theaters in the city of Buenos Aires between 1933, that it was the year where the first two sound cinema movies were premiered in Buenos Aires city, national ones, Argentinian movies, until 1944. Also here we have an interesting map that shows the spread of these movie theaters. The orange points are the movie theaters spread in Buenos Aires in 1914, the black ones from 1938, and the green ones from 1947. So we can see how it increased the number of movie theaters, and also that in 1943 they really reach the limits of the city. And here we have more information about the population density by district of the city of Buenos Aires in 1934. This is the district 16th. Every district had a different neighborhood. So Saavedra was part of this district. That the name of the district was Belgrano. That is the name of another neighborhood. And also here we have more information about the growth of the population in 1940. And we have to say that in the 30s, Buenos Aires received a lot of internal migration, people from the countryside and other provinces. Also here we have a table from 1938 with the information of 1938, and we can see how they were distributed, the movie theaters. And in our district, we find 15. But in 1940, we find 14. And in the first half of 1948, we are finding 18 movie theaters, and the number of people attending the movie theaters was about 1.5 million. Here, regarding Saavedra, here we find pictures of the facade of the two main movie theaters, the Cine Teatro Cumbre and AESCA during this period. This is a picture that it was donated by a woman, and in the picture we can find her mother and her father, that they get married, and they wanted to have that day a picture in front of the movie theater AESCA, the movie theater of the neighborhood. And the name of AESCA, it's a very strange name. Actually, we could do an interview with Maria Teresa, the daughter-in-law of the owner of the two movie theaters, because it was they were owned by the same person, Antonio Falcio, the Cumbre and AESCA. And she told us that everybody asked about this very strange name. And the explanation is because it's the name of AESCA is the first name of, it's the first letter of the name of the people of the family. So Antonio, Elvira, Sofia, Cesar, the husband of Maria Teresa, and Sofia. That's why AESCA. So a block away from the Luis Maria Saavedra train station, the AESCA movie theater was built, and it was inaugurated in 1935. As the business was good, he later built the Cumbre. Both were managed by another person who had the administration of different movie theaters in Cabildo Avenue, not so far from there, and in the downtown. Antonio Falcio was only the owner, but he never managed the movie theaters. What the interviews said is that the AESCA was smaller, with wooden seats, but it was very beautiful because of the sliding roof. And but they say that it was a second-class cinema. They did not show premieres. But in the Cumbre, according to those testimonies, they premiered films 1 or few weeks later than downtown. It was a higher quality cinema. It was larger with cushioned seats, carpeted floors, and very large standing fans for ventilation. They say that the sound was very good, and also that they were very well dressed, just like in the outings to the downtown. Maria Teresa, she said that that was the Cumbre was the nicest, even compared to the downtown. But for example, Mirta remembers that at the Cumbre she could take, when she was a kid, she could take off her shoes, but not in the downtown ones. And she also remembers a particular movie theater with blue seats in the downtown, where she felt imbued by this something of that Hollywood cinema. But she also said that the architecture of those in Saavedra stood out. That's why we can think that palaces in what we are seeing in this research, we find these palaces in every neighborhood, and modern and cosmopolitan imaginary took place in very remote neighborhood. Something that we are pointed out analyzing the interviews is some strong appeal image that appear in the interviews. In Spanish will be imágenes pregnantes. And one, we call this strong appeal image to statements of the interviews accounts that by their repetition or by the emotion in their form of enunciation articulate questions of memory and affection. The interviews tell us that the neighborhood life happened in the blocks where the train station, the cinema, the church, and the school were located. The world was reduced to those blocks of the neighborhood. It was everyone's everyday life. And they also said that those cinemas were teachers for them. For example, Maria Teresa says that people from all over came to those cinemas. She said that you could see that they got off of the train and everyone went into the cinema. The four of them, they also agreed that going out to the downtown was unusual. It's interesting because in the memory, the idea of exceptionality is mentioned, but they talk about many outings because the point was just to get out of the neighborhood, because in the downtown there were more options, and they went by train, metro, or bus. The men, they were teenagers or kids at that moment, they could go alone or with friends, but the women always were accompanied by someone. But they really had a knowledge of how to transit in the whole city. Even the sister of one interview who was in a wheelchair used the public transport to go to the downtown and to move around the city. It's interesting also that the downtown appears as this fascinating area, but also as a space of danger, because some situation of harassment it took place in the movie theaters in downtown, but that didn't happen in the neighborhood. So the neighborhood was understood as a place of care and familiarity. Another, because of the time, we also would love to point out some things about another imagen pregnante, another strong appeal image that appear a lot in the interviews of this neighborhood. That it's the idea of it was all countryside. We live at the countryside. So we can say that here we can make connections between modern imaginaries, fashion, and local urbanization processes according to the decades. As I was saying, they all agree with the self-perception of living in the countryside. They remember the dirt roads, farm animals, horse-drawn carriage until the 50s. And also they point out that there were no tall buildings in Saavedra. They also point out that they were always aware of but at the same time of all this world, they also point out that they were always aware of the latest fashions, where cinema and magazines played a fundamental role. For women, it could be the way to dress, the clothes, and for men, it could be a way of dancing, acting, etc. So there was a coexistence of these cosmopolitan imaginaries and practices in still rural areas, but rural areas that were super connected and integrated in the life of the whole city and with the downtown dynamics. Mirta, another interviewed, she said that those who lived, but something also very interesting is how Saavedra changed in this period of time, because in the 50s, Mirta point out about the appearance of a slum. In Buenos Aires slang, it will be the word villa. What in Portuguese is favela, for example. And Mirta says that those who lived in the slum did not go to the cinema. And she really she remembers that they listened to different music. For example, they listened to chamamé, folk music at the northeast of the country, and not Frank Sinatra, that it was very popular at those times. They did not participate. What she says is that they did not participate in the social life of the neighborhood, nor in the aspirational wishes of this very low class media low middle class of Saavedra. The slum was a transitory situation. So they were there just for a couple of time, and then they will move to the suburbs to buy where they will be able to buy a house outside the city. And she said something interesting. She said, it was just in front of my house, but it was another world. So what we can see is how cinema and other mass cultural consumption are part, how to think this as part of the neighborhood identity. And in this case, how cinema as an interclass experience finds its limits in the physical and symbolic territory of the slum. We're very happy to continue this discussion at the event. And here you have the link of the interviews and some information of our project. And of course, we will be very happy to listen your comments and suggestions and critics. Thank you very much for your attention.